Marcus Chen had always been different from other kids his age. At 22, while his friends were partying in college, he spent his evenings teaching his 8-year-old sister Emma basic programming concepts using colorful building blocks and simple drawings. Their parents worked double shifts at the local factory, leaving Marcus to care for Emma most days after school. Emma was not like other children either. She had an unusual way of looking at problems that often surprised even Marcus. When other kids her age were struggling with basic math, Emma would solve puzzles in ways that seemed almost magical. She would stare at a problem for a few seconds, tilt her head slightly, and then announce the answer with complete confidence. The siblings lived in a small apartment in downtown Portland. Their neighborhood was not fancy, but it was filled with hardworking families trying to make ends meet. Marcus worked part-time at a local computer repair shop while studying computer science through online courses. He dreamed of one day working for a big technology company, but those dreams seemed very far away from their current reality. One evening, while Marcus was helping Emma with her homework, she looked up from her math book and asked a question that would change everything. "Marcus, why do computers get confused when too many people try to use them at the same time?" she asked innocently. Marcus paused from fixing an old laptop and smiled. Emma always asked the most interesting questions. He tried to explain in simple terms how computer servers work, and why they sometimes crash when too many users connect simultaneously. As he spoke, Emma listened carefully, occasionally nodding or asking follow-up questions that showed she understood concepts far beyond her years. "It sounds like the computers are trying to do too many things at once," Emma said thoughtfully, "like when I try to carry too many toys and drop them all." Marcus laughed at her comparison, but something about her innocent observation stuck with him. There was a simplicity in how Emma viewed complex problems that often revealed truths he missed in his technical studies. The next morning, Marcus saw a news article on his phone that made his heart skip a beat. TechFlow Industries, one of the biggest technology companies in the city, was hosting an open innovation challenge. They were looking for solutions to their most pressing technical problems, and anyone could submit ideas. The winning solution would receive $50,000 and a job offer. Marcus read the problem statement carefully. TechFlow was struggling with server overload issues that were costing them millions of dollars every month. Their best engineers had been working on the problem for over a year, without finding a satisfactory solution. The company was desperate enough to ask the public for help. As Marcus read the technical details, he felt both excited and intimidated. This was exactly the kind of opportunity he had been dreaming about, but the problem seemed impossibly complex. TechFlow's engineering team included some of the smartest people in the industry. How could someone like him, studying from his small apartment, possibly solve something they could not? That evening, Marcus could not stop thinking about the challenge. He printed out all the technical specifications and spread them across their small kitchen table. Emma sat nearby, coloring in her favorite book, occasionally glancing at the papers covered with diagrams and numbers. "What are you working on?" Emma asked, looking up from her crayons. Marcus explained the competition and the server problem in the simplest terms he could manage. He told her about how thousands of people try to use TechFlow's services at the same time, causing the computers to slow down or stop working entirely. Emma listened quietly, then went back to her coloring. But Marcus noticed she kept glancing at the papers, and he could almost see the wheels turning in her young mind. Late that night, after Emma had gone to bed, Marcus sat staring at the problem specifications. He had filled several notebooks with potential solutions, but none of them seemed practical or innovative enough. Every approach he considered had already been tried by TechFlow's team, or had obvious flaws that would prevent it from working in the real world. As he was about to give up for the night, Marcus heard soft footsteps. Emma appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes sleepily. "I could not sleep," she said quietly. "I keep thinking about your computer problem." Marcus smiled and patted the chair next to him. "Want to help me figure it out?" Emma climbed onto the chair and looked at the papers scattered across the table. For a few minutes, she studied the diagrams and charts with the same focused attention she gave to her coloring books. "Marcus," she said suddenly, "why do the computers try to talk to everyone at the same time? Would not it be easier if they took turns?" Marcus started to explain why traditional queue systems did not work well for this type of problem. But something in Emma's innocent suggestion made him pause. "Taking turns? It was such a simple concept, but maybe there was something there worth exploring. As he tucked Emma back into bed, her words echoed in his mind. Sometimes the most complex problems required the simplest solutions. Maybe he had been overthinking everything. Maybe the answer was right in front of him. Hidden in the wisdom of an 8-year-old girl who saw the world without the complicated assumptions that adults carried. Marcus returned to his notebooks with renewed energy. But this time he approached the problem differently. Instead of trying to impress with complex technical solutions, he started thinking like Emma. What would the simplest, most logical approach look like? The next morning, Marcus woke up with dark circles under his eyes but a spark of excitement in his chest. He had spent the entire night working on a new approach to the server problem, inspired by Emma's simple observation about taking turns. His notebook was filled with sketches and calculations that looked nothing like the complex algorithms he had been attempting before. Emma found him at the kitchen table. Surrounded by empty coffee cups and crumpled papers, she climbed onto her usual chair and poured cereal into her bowl, studying her brother's tired but determined expression. "Did you solve the computer problem?" she asked between spoonfuls of cereal. Marcus looked up from his latest diagram. "I think I might be onto something, but I need to test it first." Over the next few days, Marcus worked frantically to build a prototype of his solution. He used every spare moment between his job at the repair shop and caring for Emma to code and test his idea. The concept was surprisingly simple. Instead of having all user requests compete for server resources at the same time, his system would organize them into smart groups based on what they needed. Emma watched him work each evening, occasionally offering observations that seemed far too insightful for someone her age. When Marcus got stuck on a particularly difficult coding problem, she would ask innocent questions that somehow pointed him in the right direction. "Why are you making it so complicated?" she asked one evening when Marcus was struggling with the user interface design. "My teacher says the best answers are usually the simple ones." Marcus stared at his screen, realizing he had been adding unnecessary features that would only confuse users. He deleted half his code and started over with a cleaner, simpler approach. Within hours, the system was working better than it had all week. As the submission deadline approached, Marcus felt a mixture of excitement and terror. His solution was elegant and seemed to work well in his small-scale tests, but he had no way to know if it would perform under the massive load that TechFlow experienced daily. He was about to submit an idea to one of the most successful technology companies in the world, and he was just a guy studying from his apartment with help from his 8-year-old sister. The night before the deadline, Marcus sat with Emma on their small couch, reviewing his submission one final time. The proposal was surprisingly short compared to what he imagined other applicants would submit. Most of his competitors probably had advanced degrees and years of experience at major tech companies. His solution fit on just a few pages and could be explained in terms simple enough for a child to understand. "Are you worried they will not like it?" Emma asked, noticing his nervous expression. Marcus nodded. "There are probably hundreds of really smart people applying. I am not sure my idea is good enough." Emma thought about this for a moment. "But you said the best solutions are the ones that work, right? Not the ones that sound the smartest." Her words gave Marcus the courage he needed. He submitted his proposal with 5 minutes to spare before the deadline, then tried to put it out of his mind. TechFlow had announced they would review all submissions over the next month and invite the most promising candidates to present their ideas in person. 3 weeks passed with no word from TechFlow. Marcus threw himself into his regular routine, trying not to check his email every few minutes. Emma seemed to sense his anxiety and made extra effort to be helpful around the apartment, even attempting to cook breakfast one morning with results that were both touching and slightly disastrous. Then, on a rainy Thursday morning, Marcus received the email that would change everything. TechFlow wanted him to present his solution to their engineering team the following week. The message was brief and professional, giving no indication of whether they were genuinely interested or simply going through the motions with all applicants. Marcus read the email 3 times before the reality sank in. He was going to present his idea to some of the most brilliant minds in the technology industry. The same engineers who had been unable to solve this problem for over a year would be evaluating his simple, Emma-inspired solution. The presentation was scheduled for the following Friday at TechFlow's downtown headquarters. Marcus had never been inside such an impressive building. The lobby alone was larger than his entire apartment, with floor-to-ceiling windows and modern art installations that probably cost more than he made in a year. As the day of the presentation approached, Marcus practiced his explanation over and over. Emma helped by asking questions and pointing out parts that were confusing. She had an amazing ability to identify when he was using too much technical jargon or skipping steps in his logic. "Remember," she said the night before his presentation, "just tell them about the taking turns idea. That is the part that makes sense." Marcus smiled at her advice. Despite all his nervousness, he knew Emma was right. The core of his solution was elegantly simple. If he could communicate that simplicity clearly, maybe the TechFlow team would see its potential. The morning of the presentation, Marcus put on his only suit and tried to calm his nerves. Emma gave him a hug before he left for school and whispered, "Just pretend you are explaining it to me. That always makes things easier." As Marcus walked toward the TechFlow building, he carried with him not just his presentation materials, but the wisdom of an 8-year-old girl who saw solutions where others saw only problems. He had no idea that in a few hours, he would be standing in front of the company's CEO, about to demonstrate how sometimes the most profound innovations come from the simplest observations. Marcus arrived at TechFlow headquarters 30 minutes early, his hands slightly trembling as he checked in with the receptionist. The lobby buzzed with activity as employees in expensive suits hurried past, speaking in technical terms that reminded him just how out of place he felt. He had never been in such a professional environment, and every polished surface seemed to reflect his nervousness back at him. A young woman in a crisp business suit approached him with a warm smile. "Marcus Chen, I am Sarah Kim, the engineering coordinator. We are excited to hear your presentation today." She led him through corridors lined with awards and patents, past conference rooms where teams of engineers worked on whiteboards covered with complex equations. Marcus tried to appear confident, but internally he questioned whether his simple solution could possibly impress people who worked with such sophisticated technology every day. The presentation room was larger than Marcus had expected, with a massive screen at one end and a polished conference table that could seat 20 people. As he set up his laptop, engineers began filing into the room. Most looked to be in their 30s and 40s with advanced degrees from prestigious universities. They chatted quietly among themselves, occasionally glancing at Marcus with curious expressions. "We have had over 300 submissions for this challenge," Sarah explained, as she helped Marcus test his presentation setup. "Yours was one of only 12 selected for in-person presentations." Marcus felt a surge of pride mixed with terror. He had made it this far, but now came the real test. His solution would be evaluated by experts who had been struggling with this exact problem for months. If his idea had any merit, they would spot it immediately. If it was flawed, they would see through it just as quickly. At exactly 2 o'clock, the room fell silent as someone unexpected walked in. Marcus recognized him immediately from magazine covers and news interviews. David Richardson, the CEO of TechFlow Industries. He was younger than Marcus had imagined, probably in his early 40s, with an intense but friendly demeanor that commanded immediate attention. "I hope you do not mind if I sit in," Richardson said, taking a seat at the head of the conference table. "This problem has been keeping me awake at night for months. Our server crashes are costing us nearly $2 million every month in lost business." Marcus swallowed hard. The CEO himself was here to evaluate his presentation. This was far more pressure than he had prepared for, but there was no turning back now. "Please take your time and walk us through your solution," Richardson continued. "We are all eager to hear a fresh perspective." Marcus took a deep breath and began his presentation. He started with the basics, explaining how he understood the current server overload problem. As he spoke, he tried to channel Emma's advice about explaining things simply. Instead of trying to impress with technical complexity, he focused on clear communication. The engineers listened politely but without obvious enthusiasm during the first few minutes. Marcus could sense their skepticism. They had probably heard dozens of proposed solutions over the past year, and most outside suggestions failed to account for the real-world complexities they faced daily. Then Marcus reached the core of his solution. He explained how his system would organize user requests into intelligent groups, with each group taking turns accessing server resources. Unlike traditional queue systems, his approach would predict what resources each user needed and group similar requests together. The key insight, Marcus said, gaining confidence as he spoke, is that most server crashes happen because the system tries to handle every request individually, creating chaos. But if we organize requests by their resource needs and process them in coordinated groups, we can eliminate most of the conflicts that cause overloads. One of the senior engineers, a woman with silver hair and sharp eyes, raised her hand. We have tried various queue-based approaches before. What makes your grouping algorithm different from standard load balancing? Marcus had anticipated this question. He clicked to his next slide, which showed a simple diagram that Emma had helped him create. Instead of the complex flowcharts typical of technical presentations, his diagram looked almost like a children's book illustration. Traditional load balancing treats all requests the same, Marcus explained. My system treats requests like people with different needs getting in line at different stores. If someone needs groceries and someone else needs medicine, they should not wait in the same line. The system automatically figures out what each user needs and puts them in the most appropriate group. The room was quiet for a moment as the engineers processed this explanation. Marcus could not read their expressions, but he sensed a shift in their attention level. Richardson leaned forward slightly, his eyes focused intently on the presentation screen. Marcus continued with his demonstration, showing how his prototype handled simulated server loads. The results were impressive. His system maintained stable performance even when handling request volumes that would normally crash their current servers. The solution was not just effective, it was surprisingly efficient, using less computational power than their existing system. How long did it take you to develop this? Asked another engineer. About 3 weeks, Marcus replied honestly. A murmur went through the room. 3 weeks to develop a solution that their team had been working on for over a year. Marcus could see the mixture of surprise and skepticism on their faces. Richardson asked the question that Marcus had been dreading. What is your background in distributed systems architecture? Marcus felt his face flush. I am mostly self-taught. I study computer science through online courses and work part-time at a computer repair shop. The room fell completely silent. Marcus realized how his lack of formal credentials must sound to these highly educated professionals. He had no advanced degrees, no experience at major tech companies, and no published research. By all conventional measures, he was the least qualified person in the room, but then something unexpected happened. Richardson smiled and asked, "Can you walk us through your testing methodology? I would like to understand exactly how you validated these performance improvements." Marcus spent the next 20 minutes walking the TechFlow team through his testing process. He had built his prototype using open-source tools and simulated user loads with creative workarounds that cost almost nothing but provided surprisingly accurate results. The engineers asked increasingly detailed technical questions, and Marcus found himself answering confidently, drawing on knowledge he had gained through months of self-study. What impressed the team most was not just the technical sophistication of his solution, but the practical wisdom behind it. Marcus had considered real-world implementation challenges that many academic solutions overlooked. His system was designed to work with existing infrastructure, minimizing the disruption and cost of deployment. The beautiful thing about this approach, Marcus explained, is that it gets smarter over time. The more requests it handles, the better it becomes at predicting user needs and creating efficient groups. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the senior engineer who had asked the first question, nodded thoughtfully. This is actually quite elegant. You have essentially created a self-improving system that learns from user behavior patterns. Richardson had been taking notes throughout the presentation, occasionally exchanging glances with his engineering team. Marcus could not interpret these silent communications, but the CEO seemed genuinely engaged rather than politely tolerating another unsuccessful pitch. I have one more question, Richardson said as Marcus concluded his presentation. Where did you get the inspiration for this grouping approach? It is quite different from the typical solutions we see. Marcus hesitated. Should he tell them about Emma? Would it sound unprofessional to admit that his breakthrough came from the observations of an 8-year-old? But he remembered Emma's advice about being honest and simple in his explanations. Actually, the core idea came from my little sister, Marcus said. She is 8 years old and she asked me why computers try to talk to everyone at the same time instead of taking turns. Her innocent question made me realize I was overcomplicating the problem. The room fell silent again, But this time the silence felt different. Instead of skepticism, Marcus sensed genuine curiosity. Richardson leaned back in his chair, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Sometimes the most profound insights come from the most unexpected sources. Children often see solutions that adults miss because they are not constrained by conventional thinking. Dr. Walsh nodded in agreement.
Some of the greatest innovations in computer science have come
from people who approached problems without preconceived notions about what was impossible. The presentation concluded with a round of technical questions. That tested Marcus's understanding of his own solution. He answered each query confidently, demonstrating that while his idea might have originated from a simple observation, he had developed it with thorough technical rigor. As the engineers filed out of the conference room, several stopped to shake Marcus's hand and compliment his work. Dr. Walsh lingered to discuss specific implementation details, clearly impressed by the depth of his technical knowledge despite his unconventional background. Richardson remained seated as the room emptied, still reviewing his notes. Finally, he looked up at Marcus with an expression that was difficult to read. "Marcus, I want you to know that your presentation has been one of the most refreshing we have seen in months. Your solution addresses our problem in a way that is both innovative and practical." Marcus felt his heart racing. "Thank you, sir. I really appreciate the opportunity to present to your team. I would like to propose something," Richardson continued. "Instead of just awarding you the prize money and sending you on your way, what if we brought you in as a consultant to help implement this solution? We could start with a 3-month contract to build and test your system with our actual server infrastructure." Marcus could hardly believe what he was hearing. A 3-month consulting contract with TechFlow would pay more than he earned in an entire year at the computer repair shop. More importantly, it would give him the chance to see his solution implemented at real scale. "That sounds incredible," Marcus managed to say. "But I should mention that I would need to arrange care for my sister during working hours." Richardson's expression softened. "The sister who inspired your solution? We are very family-friendly here at TechFlow. I am sure we can work out a schedule that accommodates your family responsibilities." As Marcus left the TechFlow building that afternoon, his mind was spinning with possibilities. Not only had his presentation been successful, but he was about to begin a professional relationship with one of the most respected technology companies in the region. The simple question from an 8-year-old girl had opened doors he had never imagined possible. That evening, Marcus burst through the apartment door with news that would change their lives. Emma was at the kitchen table working on homework, just as she had been on the night he first discovered the TechFlow challenge. "Emma, you are not going to believe what happened today," Marcus said, unable to contain his excitement. Emma looked up from her math worksheet with the same curious expression she always wore when her brother had something important to share. She had no idea that her innocent question about computers taking turns had just launched both of their futures in an entirely new direction. Marcus sat down beside her and began to tell the story of his presentation. But as he spoke, he realized the most important part was still to come. Tomorrow, he would start working to implement their solution at one of the biggest technology companies in the city. But tonight, he was just a big brother sharing exciting news with the little sister who had made it all possible. 3 months later, Marcus stood in the TechFlow server room watching lines of code execute across dozens of monitors. The implementation of his solution had been more challenging than he had anticipated, but the results exceeded everyone's expectations. Server crashes had been reduced by 95%, and the system was handling twice the user load of their previous setup. Emma had become something of a celebrity around the TechFlow offices. Richardson had insisted on meeting the young girl whose simple observation had solved their million-dollar problem. She visited the office every few weeks, usually after school, and had somehow managed to charm every engineer on the team with her innocent questions and surprising insights. "How does it feel to see your idea working at this scale?" Dr. Walsh asked Marcus as they reviewed the latest performance metrics. Marcus shook his head in amazement. 6 months ago, I was fixing broken laptops and dreaming about maybe getting an entry-level programming job someday. Now I am watching my code handle millions of user requests every hour. The success of the implementation had led to unexpected opportunities. Other technology companies had heard about TechFlow's breakthrough solution and wanted to license the technology. Richardson had offered Marcus a permanent position as a senior systems architect, with a salary that would completely transform his family's financial situation. But the most rewarding part was watching Emma's confidence grow. She had always been bright, but seeing how her simple question had led to such significant results had given her a new understanding of her own potential. She approached her schoolwork with increased enthusiasm and had started asking if Marcus could teach her more advanced programming concepts. One afternoon, as Marcus was preparing to leave the office, Sarah Kim approached with an unusual request. "Marcus, we have been asked to present our solution at the National Technology Conference next month. Mr. Richardson thinks you should be the one to give the presentation, and he specifically requested that Emma be allowed to participate as well." Marcus was stunned. The National Technology Conference was one of the most prestigious events in the industry, attended by CEOs and engineers from major companies across the country. The idea of presenting there was both thrilling and terrifying. "He wants Emma to present too?" Marcus asked. Sarah smiled. "He thinks it would be powerful for the audience to hear from the person who actually inspired the solution. Emma would not have to give a technical presentation, just share her perspective on problem solving." That evening, Marcus discussed the opportunity with Emma over dinner. She listened carefully as he explained what the conference would involve and how many important people would be in the audience. "Will there be other kids there?" Emma asked. "Probably not many," Marcus admitted. "Most of the attendees will be adults who work for technology companies." Emma considered this for a moment. "But they all started as kids once, right? Maybe they forgot how to think like kids, and that is why they get stuck on hard problems." Her observation was so insightful that Marcus had to pause and think about it. There was definitely truth in what she said. Many of the most innovative solutions came from people who could step outside conventional thinking patterns. "Would you be willing to share that idea with the conference audience?" Marcus asked. Emma nodded enthusiastically. "I like helping people understand things better." The month leading up to the conference was a whirlwind of preparation. Marcus worked with the TechFlow marketing team to develop a presentation that would effectively communicate their solution to a broad, technical audience. Meanwhile, Emma worked with Sarah Kim to prepare her own short presentation about creative problem solving. The conference was held in San Francisco at one of the city's largest convention centers. Marcus had never seen so many technology professionals gathered in one place. The main auditorium seated over 1,000 people, and every seat was filled when their presentation time arrived. Richardson introduced Marcus and Emma to the audience, explaining how their collaboration had solved a problem that had stumped experienced engineers for over a year. The audience listened with polite interest, but Marcus could sense some skepticism about the unconventional story they were about to hear. Marcus delivered the technical portion of the presentation flawlessly, walking through their solution with clear explanations and impressive performance data. The audience responded positively, asking thoughtful questions that demonstrated genuine interest in the technology. Then it was Emma's turn. She walked to the microphone with the same confidence she showed when answering questions in her third-grade classroom. The large auditorium fell completely silent as this small girl prepared to address some of the most successful technology executives in the country. "Hi, everyone," Emma began in her clear, young voice. "My name is Emma, and I am 8 years old. I want to tell you about something I learned from helping my brother solve a really hard computer problem." She paused and looked out at the sea of faces watching her with rapt attention. Sometimes, grown-ups make problems harder than they need to be because you know so much stuff that you forget the simple answers. When Marcus told me about the computers getting confused when too many people use them at the same time, I just thought it was like when too many kids try to go down the slide at once. The solution is not to build a bigger slide. It is to take turns. The audience was completely captivated. Emma continued with the same natural wisdom that had inspired Marcus months earlier. "I think maybe sometimes you should pretend you are kids again when you have really hard problems. Kids do not know what is supposed to be impossible, so we try things that grown-ups would not try. And sometimes those things work really well." When Emma finished speaking, the auditorium erupted in applause that lasted nearly 2 minutes. Marcus watched in amazement as 1,000 technology professionals gave his little sister a standing ovation for her profound insights about creative thinking. The response to Emma's conference presentation was unlike anything Marcus could have imagined. Within hours of the event, videos of her speech were spreading across social media and technology news websites. The sight of an 8-year-old girl delivering profound insights about innovation to a room full of industry leaders had captured the attention of people far beyond the technology. Community major news networks wanted to interview Emma and Marcus about their story. Technology magazines wrote feature articles about how simple observations could lead to breakthrough solutions. Several universities invited them to speak about unconventional approaches to problem solving. But perhaps the most meaningful response came from children and young people who saw Emma's presentation online. Thousands of kids sent messages saying that Emma had inspired them to share their ideas with adults and to believe that their young perspectives could make a real difference. Back at TechFlow, Richardson was fielding calls from companies around the world wanting to license their server optimization technology. The solution that had started with Emma's innocent question was now being implemented by major corporations across multiple industries, preventing server crashes and saving millions of dollars in lost productivity. "You realize what you two have accomplished, do not you?" Richardson said during a meeting with Marcus and Emma 6 months after the conference. "Your technology is now running on servers that handle over 1 billion user requests every day. That little question about taking turns has literally changed how the internet works for millions of people." Emma, now 9 years old and even more confident than before, smiled at the CEO. "That is pretty cool, but I think the best part is that other kids are not afraid to share their ideas anymore." She was right. The most lasting impact of their story was not the technical innovation, but the message it sent about the value of diverse perspectives in problem solving. Schools had started encouraging students to contribute ideas for solving community problems. Technology companies had begun consulting with children and teenagers when developing new products. Marcus had accepted the permanent position at TechFlow and was now leading a team of 12 engineers working on advanced server technologies. His salary allowed the family to move to a larger apartment in a better neighborhood, and Emma was enrolled in an excellent school with advanced programs for gifted students. But perhaps more importantly, Marcus had discovered his true calling. He loved the technical challenges of his work, but he was even more passionate about mentoring young people who showed interest in technology. He had started volunteering at local schools, teaching programming to kids and encouraging them to see technology as a tool for solving problems they cared about. Emma had developed her own interests beyond inspiring her brother's career. She was excelling in mathematics and science, but she was equally passionate about art and creative writing. She had started a blog where she wrote about interesting problems she encountered and invited other kids to share their solutions. The blog had attracted thousands of young readers who contributed their own creative approaches to challenges in their schools and communities. One evening, as Marcus was helping Emma with a particularly challenging science project, she looked up from her notebook with the same thoughtful expression he remembered from that night. She had asked about computers taking turns. "Marcus," she said, "I have been thinking about something. What if we could help kids from different countries work together to solve problems? Like, what if a kid in Japan had a great idea that could help kids in Brazil but they never got to meet each other?" Marcus paused his work and looked at his sister. Even after everything they had accomplished together, Emma continued to amaze him with insights that seemed far beyond her years. "That is a really interesting idea," he said. "How do you think something like that could work?" Emma's eyes lit up with excitement as she began explaining her vision for a global network where young people could collaborate on solving problems in their communities. As she spoke, Marcus recognized the same spark of innovation that had led to their breakthrough at TechFlow. Listening to Emma outline her ideas, Marcus realized that their story was far from over. The young girl who had casually asked why computers did not take turns was now envisioning ways to help children around the world take turns sharing their creativity and problem-solving abilities. As he had learned many times over the past year, the most powerful innovations often began with the simplest questions from the most unexpected sources. Emma had taught him that age, education, and experience were not prerequisites for changing the world. Sometimes all it took was curiosity, courage, and the willingness to see problems from a completely different perspective. Their journey from a small apartment in Portland to the stage of a national technology conference had proven that breakthrough solutions could come from anywhere. But more importantly, it had shown that when we listen to fresh perspectives and embrace unconventional thinking, we discover possibilities that would otherwise remain hidden. Marcus smiled as he watched Emma sketch out diagrams for her new project. He had no doubt that whatever challenge she decided to tackle next, The world would be better for having her unique perspective. After all, she was the little girl who had looked at one of the technology industry's most complex problems and suggested that maybe computers just needed to learn how to take turns.